You need to have a story that tugs at heartstrings so people are willing to open the purse strings. And that comes from the awareness that we buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. And that's why the story is the secret sauce to getting a yes.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. B, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I have a super special guest to tell us about the power of storytelling. Did you know that telling stories is a way that humans have learned to connect and communicate with each other for centuries? It's how we elicit emotion with one another, how we build connection, and how we build empathy with one another, which is why storytelling is so important, not only in the fields of marketing and sales, because what you're trying to do is persuade somebody to do something, but storytelling is actually a really valuable skill to learn how to do for yourself, how you actually tell your own story, particularly the story you tell about yourself, of yourself, because it changes your biology. We mentioned before that story actually moves people to emotion. Good movies will move people to feel. And what you tell yourself about yourself also elicits those emotions. So if you tell yourself a victim story of how you're a victim, you're going to raise the stress hormone cortisol in your body, increase inflammation, lower immunity, leading to chronic symptoms of chronic disease. You tell yourself an empowering story, a story where you change the meaning of the things that happened in the past and into a compelling future. You will be inspired by your life and put yourself in those anti-aging emotions that I talk about in the book Thrive State. And heck, if you haven't picked up a copy, you can do so at thrivestatebook.com. Also, there's an online course where we accelerate your process to get to Thrive State. You can access that by going to kienvu.com/accelerator and using the coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now, the person I'm going to bring in today is actually a masterful storyteller. He actually teaches salespeople, organizations, and people actually how to bring stories into your life and actually how to tell them, because there is a structure and there are methods that make your stories more impactful to other people. His name is John Livesay. He's also known as the Pitch Whisperer. He's actually a sales keynote speaker where he shows companies and salespeople how to turn mundane case studies into compelling case stories so they win more business. And in this case, I want you to learn the power of a story, not only how to connect and engage more people in your life, but how to connect and engage with yourself better as well. John Livesay is also a TEDx speaker, and his TEDx talk, Be the Lifeguard of Your Own Life, actually has over 1 million views. He's currently a guest lecturer on how to leverage the power of storytelling in sales at multiple universities, including the University of Texas at Austin, Pepperdine School of Business, and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And his book is actually required reading for the UTLA course on entertainment and media studies. He's the co-creator of the Superhero You, which is actually a community to help people discover the superhero powers and to live a life full of confidence and creativity. You're going to learn a lot from this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, John Livesay. What are the elements of a powerful story? What makes a story good? What makes a story not good?
Well, there's 3 C's that I have that make a great story. And you can use this as your own little internal checklist. Is it clear? If it's not clear, if it's confusing people, the confused mind says no, and they don't tell you why they're confused.
Yeah.
Is it concise? Why does it need to be concise? So that it can be remembered and repeated, because there's the second meeting. Let's say you're interviewing for a real estate agent, a lawyer, whatever it is, or you're pitching yourself to be a speaker.
Yeah.
They typically interview 2 or 3 other people. And if you're the one that tells a story that's repeatable and memorable, they can repeat that story and say, this is why I think we should hire this person.
Yeah.
And then finally, it needs to be compelling, because you need to have a story that tugs at heartstrings so people are willing to open the purse strings. And that comes from the awareness that we buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. And that's why the story is the secret sauce to getting a yes. So clear, concise, and compelling. One of my clients is Olympus Medical, the camera company that makes medical equipment. And they were saying to doctors, well, this equipment makes your surgeries go 30% faster. So logical, don't you want one, doc? And I said, yes, but even the most technical, expensive equipment still requires an emotional story. So now they tell this story. Imagine how happy Dr. Higgins was 6 months ago down at Long Beach Memorial when he could go out to the patient's family in the waiting room an hour earlier than expected and put them out of their waiting misery. And if you've ever waited for a loved one to come out of a surgery, you know every minute feels like an hour. He comes out, he says, good news, the scope shows they didn't have cancer, they're going to be fine. Turns to the rep and says, you know, that's why I became a doctor, for moments like this. Now that rep tells that short little case story to another doctor at another hospital who sees himself in the story and says, you know what? That's why I became a doctor. I want your equipment too. The people at Olympus Medical said, God, that story gives us chills. Not only are we not telling a story, it never even occurred to us to make a patient's family a character in the story. And you see how I pulled you in by saying, if you've ever waited for someone you love. And even if you haven't, you can probably imagine, or you know somebody who did go through that. So that's a quick example of a case story. It's clear, it's concise, it's compelling. People can remember it. They see them, the doctors see themselves in it, and they're the hero of the story, not you. Those are the other big tip.
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast. Really, how do people use stories? To create connection and conversations, to build relationships. Where do you think the role of stories is in just everyday life, and how telling a compelling story can help build relationships and foster what you do?
Well, I think one of the best ways to build connections is to show some vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that you don't always have it together. And so even that little story of me singing Broadway show tunes over my shoulder in the airport, that tells people a little bit about my personality.
Yeah.
And so people either are drawn into that or repelled, and either way is fine. Not everybody has to like us. So I think that's one of the more, and again, something like that makes you a little memorable too. So if you come up with a story about an experience you had that shows a little bit of your passion and your personality, and how quickly you can change your mood from, oh, this happened and then that happened and now, oh, now something great's happened. That we're always a choice of being the movie director of our own life.
Yeah.
And that you can yell cut, you can change the cast, you can change the location. And that analogy seems to give us a lot of freedom to not stay stuck in whatever mood or situation we're in. I created something to help all of us let go of whatever negative. We all get rejected, we get disappointed, we get sometimes betrayed even. Like every little thing from like somebody cutting you off in traffic that can really annoy and aggravate some people. And I call it the 5-5-5 method. You just simply ask yourself, will this matter in 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days from now? You're zooming out.
Yeah.
And you're like, 5 minutes from now, I'm not going to be thinking about that person that cut me off in traffic, hopefully, right? I don't. But when big things happen, we get a rejection, we get a no.
Yeah.
It's up to us to say, am I going to still be thinking about that 5 days from now, or do I want to let it go now? And people love this tool. I have all kinds of companies now saying, I 5-5-5 something that I normally would have been obsessing with for weeks.
All the tools and techniques and education you've been through, all the courses that you've learned from gurus and books that you've read. What has been your best medicine?
My best medicine has been swimming.
Wow.
I started swimming competitively when I was 10 years old. And I had been a little husky, chubby little boy wearing husky pants. And I was never really good with hand-eye coordination, but swimming I could do. And I loved it. And I would hear music in my head and I would speed up the music to speed up my swimming. And then I, auditioned, I don't think that's the right word, for the swim team. And I got on the swim team when I was in high school and became a lifeguard. And still to this day, I love swimming. It helps ground me, clear my head, and I just feel fully alive doing it. So whenever I'm having aches or pains or mental stress, that's the #1 go-to medicine for me.
I hope you enjoyed those highlights from this week's Thrive State podcast. To hear the full episode of the podcast, you can listen at Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are heard. Now, if you're enjoying the content, please help this podcast grow by leaving us a review at ratethispodcast.com/Thrive State. Also, if you really want to get into the Thrive State, people ask me, where do I start or how do I get deeper? Well, here are a few resources for you. #1, you can pick up 3 free chapters of my book at thrivestatebook.com. In addition, if you want to go a little bit deeper, get to meet myself and my team, and get some online coaching, we have an online course called the Thrive State Accelerator. It's the same material I go through to get my clients into the Thrive State. Go to kienbu.com/accelerator and use the coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off. And yes, I am a concierge physician at the VU MD Performance and Longevity Clinic. I have a very small concierge practice, but if you or somebody you know may want to be a client, consider applying at kienbu.com/VUUMD. And until next time, remember always, always, always that you are your best medicine.